I can actually start if that's fine. I mean, topic of A/B testing. It's it's. What I mentioned in the beginning of my speech, I think the first discussion was that the experimentation, right? This is kind of the theme for us today, and growth marketing in general, growth hacking is to some extent about experimentation, right? How we compare things, how we try to be scrappy, how we try to use this growth mindset, right? And in A/B testing, which is actually one one of few types of experimentation is the detailed way, or kind of one of the ways to have the robust experimentation. Okay, cool. I have the slides, just to give you a heads up, we will go a little bit technical in this. A/B experimentation is about statistics a little bit. I'm not a statistician, so don't ask me all these questions, because I won't be able to answer it. I just want to show you this kind of a mind approach as a growth marketer of how to run these tests. And you don't need this, but my key objective again for the session is that I want to excite you about this experimentation process, right? I want you to again, like, look at your website, your mobile app, and see what you can experiment with. You guys seen the slides? You guys seen the slides? So let me just go into the importance. So, how many of you know Avinash Kaushik? Cool. Yeah. So that's kind of a analytics guru. That's the guy I think who used to work for Google many years back, and now he's like working with lots of companies on the analytics. And he says that that the experimentation practice, right, will have a huge impact. And even him, which is like guru of analytics, says that even even if you leave the analytics behind, like, this is probably experimentation, something that will give you probably the most of a uplift. Again, guys, so I mentioned this, the key to growth, a couple of things, but experimentation is one of them. This is what we're gonna focus on. I'm gonna call it A/B testing experimentation. It's all the same, right? It's all about the same thing. Right. So what is the A/B testing about? Right. So it's a process of showing two variants of the same web page, let's say, of the same screen of the mobile app, to different segments of website visitors at the same time, right? And comparing which variants drives more conversions, right? That's to make it very easy. And we want to solve the visitors' pain points. We want to get more conversions by investing less, right? So we want to reduce bounce rates. We want to make if we want to redesign on the website or the mobile app, if you want to change the product pricing or change the feature, everything should be tested, right? And that's the mindset thing. I mean, very rarely you should have an assumption that whatever you do, it's an improvement, because sometimes it's not, right? I've seen multiple experiments, multiple tests that the tech team, the product team was working on improvements. They say, well, we have this amazing feature, we have this improvement. They launch it, and then the metrics are going down, right? Because in the end, it was improving only in their heads, not the customer's heads. So you should have this kind of a mindset that whatever you guys wanna implement should be A/B tested, and that's the real visualization of it, right? So so you have the group of people, let's say the visitors. You have a question. Okay, well, which landing page is better? Or we have the landing page with the form in it, right, for lead generation. But we know that the conversion rate is not super high, because we just spoke to a friend of ours who has the same kind of a business, and he says we have 10% conversion rate, and you see that you have only 5% conversion rate. So you have this kind of a benchmark, right? So you say, okay, well, so what shall we improve? And again, you can search for multiple tactics, and if you Google how to improve conversion rate on the landing page, there are going to be like tons and multiple of different ideas. Let's say one of the idea is you should have your form smaller, right? Because it's proven that the more forms, the more fields in the form you have, obviously the lead will be more valuable for you, right? But then the conversion rate will go down because people don't want to fill in so many data. So for example, by this you might have a hypothesis that you want to have less fields in your landing page. So you create one variation. So you have the control, which is your existing website. And you have the variation, which is your existing website only with changed form, like this. So you make it shorter, and basically you wanna compare, right? So you wanna randomly select a user that will go to control, to option B, and to option A and option B, right? And then see which landing page will actually increase the conversion rate in the form, right? So that's basically how it works. And again, it's like a research. You have the control group. So if you don't do any kind of research, right, at university as well, you have the control group. So nothing changed for this group, and you have the variant, the sample, right? So different variations, something that changes, and you observe, and you should it should obviously in theory it should be statistical significance. So you should have enough people to be able to say that from the statistical standpoint, this result is actually significant and has the highest probability of correct results. And there are multiple tools you can use right now. I mean, I mentioned earlier today that we used to have, still have Google Optimize, which is the easiest tool. For example, right now VWO, so Visual Website Optimizer, is the tool probably I would choose right now because they have some free option, and it's very simple. You just implement a snippet on your website. And you can change the front end, so it's like loading a little bit of JavaScript, and it's kind of changing few elements, whatever elements you want, to 50% of your visitors, or the percentage obviously you can change, and then people might see different options. Amplitude and Firebase, I use it personally for A/B testing in the mobile apps. I mean, I use Firebase because it's for free. Amplitude is a great analytical tool with some A/B testing features, but it's expensive. Optimizely and Convert still for websites experimentation, but again, pretty expensive. And with as with everything, there is a good time, right, to be making A/B experimentation. And we have this, optimization phases called ROAR, which is like risk optimization, automation, rethink. And basically the rule of thumb, right, is like if you have less than 1,000 conversions per month, it's going to be very difficult to have this kind of a statistically significant results. I'm going to show you the calculator in a moment, how it works. So basically, the more data you have, right, the more visitors, the more conversions you have, you can experiment more. Obviously, it doesn't mean there's nothing you can do, because you can always experiment. But the rule of thumb, again, I'm going to tell you from experience, is that if you have less traffic or less visitors you're starting up, it's better to test big changes, right? Which means if you are, Booking.com, you have millions of visitors, and by the way, Booking.com runs probably like, 100 tests simultaneously. You can easily test, tiny changes like, color of a button, or, like one sentence here is different than there, and you can really observe the change. And this is what they mean by the small impact, right? So we have changes that have relatively small impact, but can have some outcome. And for the less traffic, the less conversions you have, you should think about things that have bigger impact, if that makes sense. So, for example, if I had a business that's just starting up, I want to test the landing page, right? I wouldn't test the same landing page with tiny change, which is the same landing page but just different, for example, color of a button. I would test completely different, completely redesigned landing page. So 2 different type of landing pages, if that makes sense. Does it make sense for you guys? Cool. And again, it's all about the So it's all about the statistics, right? And you have many of the A/B testing calculators, right? So in A/B testing, we have things like statistical significant, confidence level, which is the same. And what it means that the way it works like this, just put it that way. You put a couple of variables, right? One is the actual conversion rate, so what you're starting with. Then is what's the expected improvement. So for example, again, you have the hypothesis that you want to decrease the number of fields in your lead generation form. And you say, right now we have 5% of conversion rate, and I believe, right, that's my hypothesis, that with the less fields in my form, I will be able to improve this conversion by 30%, let's say. So that's what you put over there. And they also ask about the unique visitors you have per week on your page, right? So this is what you put the numbers, and the number of how long you wanna run this experiment. But the number of visitors is the most important, because then the system is able to tell you with the proper confidence level, so be able to say that I have statistically significant results. You're going to have like 30,000 sample size, right? And you need to run this experiment for 58 weeks, right? So you see that it's really impossible because you don't have enough users. Does it make sense so far? And I wanna show you. So again, like, what is the statistical significance, right? It's like how likely is that the difference between your experience control version and the test, so the things you experiment with, isn't due to error or a random chance, right? For example, if you run a test with a 95% of significance level, you can be 95% confident that the differences are real, right? So you can be 95% confident that what system shows you is an actual thing, right? And as well mentioned, low traffic, less statistical significance, right? So for example, if you want to decrease the number of people you need for the experiment, you can also, in the tools, you can decrease the confidence interval, because, for example, coming back to the previous slide, it says you need 30,000 people with your current metrics to have 95% confidence level. And again, there's still 5% of chances that when you launch, when you roll out the experiment, the winner of the experiment to the whole group, there's still 5% of chance that the results will be different. And if you want to decrease the number of this 30,000 visitors you need, you can decrease the confidence level, right? So for example, if you say, I want to have only 50% of chances, right? I want to be 50% sure that if the system shows me the winner of an experiment, then probably you're going to need like 500 or 1,000 people, very, very less. But then it's a 50-50 chance. Does it make sense? I know it's really complicated. Sometimes it's even complicated to me. And the statistical power, it's pure statistical, right? It's the probability of rejecting the null hypothesis, which is an assumption, right? When it is false, and the null hypothesis is, so you basically reject the how you call it. Yeah, so actually the quotation here really explains really well. So power is usually set at 80%, so that's what I don't change personally. It's always like 80%. And what it means that if there are true effects to be found, right, in 100 different studies with 80% power, only 80 out of 100 statistical tests will actually detect them, right? So there's always this kind of a number of experiments that will not show the results, right? It's the same as you test I don't know. As you test the medicine, right? Like you test 100 people, and then 20 of them will not show any effects. Cool. And I want to show you in practice what it means, right? And why it's important. So that's actually the experiment I did some time ago on the Play Store, right? So the Play Store, the place when you download the Google, the Android apps from. You can A/B test multiple things. Very nice, very easy, easy dashboard. And I was experimenting with the screenshots, right? So when you want to download the app, you see the screenshots. That's some value propositions. I was just experimenting different background colors, different value propositions. And I launched it on 15th of February. And there are two lines. One is the current version, and the other one is the new one. And if you guys see, so obviously, like, I'm always getting very excited because in the first days you see, wow, the new version is working really well. Like, and this is the conversion, by the way. You can see that the orange one is having more conversions. That's amazing, right? I made a win. But then the more time you wait, you can see that actually the lines are getting very similar. It's the difference is getting blurred. And then what you see, and this is what you see on the right-hand side, is that the new the variant B, so the new version, is between 6.4% or 7.4% to actually outgrow, to be better than the control version, which means that the test is completely inconclusive, right? Because it tells me nothing. And the longer we run it, the thinner it gets, right? If I, for example, say, I don't want to have this statistical significant results, and I don't care, then I would stop, on the day 3, because I was like, after 3 days and I don't know how many, like let's say 1,000 of installations, I had the new version is working better. I go to my management to say, yes, we found the version. Let's roll it out, right, to 100% of users, and then actually we can decrease the conversion, right? So that's what is all about, and what you can test, right? So obviously I mentioned the Play Store things. You can test websites. You can test the ads, right? So for example, you can, if you're running ads, you can have the same audience, the same messaging, but different banner, different image, or you can have the same audience, the same image, but different text, different copy, right? It's very important to have only one thing that you change, right? Because if you have too many changes, it's very difficult to understand like what actually has an impact, what actually impacted the change. You can have the same ads but different audience, and so on. You obviously can A/B test emails, and that's probably the easiest to start with. Every tool that you can send emails with have the at least subject testing tool, so you can at least try to influence the open rates, and obviously the content itself is also to be tested. And then mobile apps, and the mobile app itself, right? So if you guys have the mobile app, I always, try to start with the onboarding, right? So the first experience, if I want to experiment with it, because very often it's the most important, like how you explain your app, or very often you have like this 3 screens, which says like this is up, the app is for this, for that, and so on. Because very often, if you open the app, you're new to this app, you don't know what's happening, you have no, data, so you can just bounce and you're never going to come back. And then the Play Stores or the App Stores itself, you can really experiment with everything, with the videos, with the screenshots, with the icons, and again, if you're gonna Google A/B testing on the mobile app, it will show you all the places. Obviously, like the headers, the copy, the text. So that's really, really powerful. And there are a couple of types of tests. So we have regular A/B, which is called a split test. So you have the same, website, but just you change one thing. Multivariate test. You basically test simultaneously lots of variations of the same page, right? So simultaneously, so that's only for big companies with really lots of traffic that I want to get the results quicker. I don't believe I haven't run a multiple variate test myself, to be honest. And then there's a multi-page testing where you can change particular elements with on cross multiple pages. And again, it's it's going to be complicated, and the systems, very complicated systems, do it for you. And the testing process, again and again and again, you guys seen it many times. It's like understanding what you wanna change. And I mentioned again, coming back to my example, which is the conversion rate on the landing page. That's what you wanna improve. Then need to think of how to improve it, right? I mentioned that I want to test, smaller form fields, but perhaps I should really work on the copy, right? On the value propositions on this page, or I don't know, adding like building trust, adding some kind of a testimonial from my clients and so on. Run the experiment, create variations, analyze the results, and repeat. And what I think is extremely important, and coming back to this customer-driven thing. How many of you uses Hotjar or Clarity like user observation? Perfect. That's good, because that's really important, right? And you obviously have this quantitative data. So in Google Analytics, you're able to say that the conversion rate on the site is lower than what we expect, but it doesn't tell you why, right? And this qualitative data. By watching users going through it, like playing with your product, you can able to say, well, they're actually bouncing or they're not scrolling down, and it always should tweak spark some ideas with you. And Microsoft Clarity is for free, so that's amazing tool. And then put everything into the backlog. Right, so what your ideas you have, and put everything in the testing plan. You can always think about the development time, right? So obviously, we're talking about the product. So think about the costs, right? Because you can have an idea that will be very quickly to develop. You can have an idea that will take some more time. And prioritize. And I mentioned ICE, so importance, confidence, ease. So what does it mean? Is like you need to score your ideas based on how important they are for your business and for the metric on a scale 1 to 5, 1 being the lowest, 5 being the highest. Confidence, like how confident you are that it's actually this hypothesis can be validated, right? 1 being the lowest, 5 being the highest, and it's basically if you run like multiple experiments with landing pages where you actually increase conversion rate by changing the form, then your confidence is really high, right? Because you've done it, you know that's gonna work. And the ease, which is also important, 1 being the most difficult, 5 being the easiest, like how easy or how difficult it is to implement this change, right? Again, if you need 2 hours to build an experiment by yourself, that's super easy. If you need 2 weeks or 2 sprints and the whole team needs to build it, that's pretty difficult. Sorry, and the pie, which is potential importances, which is more or less the same. It's just a different technique. What you do, you just sum it up, all these points, you divide it by 3, and you have the pie results or ICE results, whatever, or you just multiply it. But you see the scale, right? So the highest the results, you should start with it. Hypothesis, multiple. We discussed it many times. It's always good to have this hypothesis, and mistakes to avoid, right? Just to finish up, not running the test long enough. Right, so you always need to be conscious that if you want to run A/B tests, you need some time just to get the proper number of users. You should, 90% of your time should focus on one metric, right? So think of what you want to improve. Is it conversion rate? Is it something else? Obviously, it's very interesting just to try to build segments. So try to understand, and you can do it in tools, in analytical tools. You can divide the cohorts, so you can observe the users that went through control version and went through the version B, and see what effects it has on other metrics like time spent on site or add to carts, whatever that is. Testing at the wrong time, so that's something that depends on the business, right? Depends. Some you have seasonalities on the business. You have different audiences being active in different part of the day. So you always need to consider it by yourself. Testing too many elements, variation together. That's probably like the most common mistake I came across. So just test one thing. If you're gonna test two things on the same experiment, you have no idea. Obviously, you can think you have what's going on, but you have no idea what actually implement the results. And inaccurate audience sample size, which is again to statistical significance. You need to have the proper group of testing. And how to start? Understand if you have enough traffic for A/B testing. Right? If you don't have enough traffic, think about the big changes you have to do. If you don't have enough traffic, you can always think about different things to A/B test, maybe emails, maybe ads, and so on. Understand the metrics, right? So understand what you want to improve by A/B testing, experimentation. Build a backlog, experiment, learn from the results, and that's it. Thank you. Any questions?
A hard question.
Oh my God. About statistics? Hope not.
You probably know Norman Group website, yes?
Yeah.
So they have a lot of conclusions based on testing, and just not only testing, but a lot of research. So it's very useful just to see what works and what not. Maybe you know some other sources that show good examples. Why I'm asking this, because I am creating websites, but I don't get a lot of conversions. So for me, A/B testing will not work. But maybe there are some sources, so we don't have to invite the bicycle. And we can see, like you have shown the example of form, the one that works. So maybe someone else can also share. Thanks.
That's a good question, and there are multiple sources for it. And myself, I'm part of a couple of newsletters that are actually sending the best practices, right? Because I think what you mentioned is like, what are the best practices, right? To build products, right, in a way, or as you mentioned, like what we learned from experimentation, right? So, unfortunately, I don't know it by heart. I don't remember the name, but there are multiple sources you can do. There are multiple books as well about A/B testing, and in every book there is this kind of a part about the best practices. So perhaps what we can do, I can message Philip, right, and then he can maybe share with all of you guys. So you're gonna have, because you're right, there are multiple, yeah. There are multiple, websites like this when they actually analyze the A/B test from the others, right? They analyze for example, NordVPN tested this and that. This is the result, right? And this is what you can what you can do. Yep. Cool.
There is one question from online. What is the best result you got from A/B testing?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I managed to improve the conversion rate on the Play Store for the mobile apps just by playing with the visuals by 50%, which is pretty good result. I was also doing a lot of A/B experimentation with the onboarding for the mobile app, right? So we did a lot of good results from there as well, only by playing with the value propositions, right? So for example, instead of saying the app will do this and that, say, well, the app will help you in this and that way, right? So be more kind of a user-oriented, very simple experiments. Only the way how we, position ourselves and how you experiment. But that's for me, obviously, the most fun part with this is that you very often have super unexpected results. So, you launch the experiment, which you don't believe, we don't think it's going to be a massive increase or whatever, and you just see like everything is jumping up. It's like, why? I mean, what's the reason, right? Try to understand. So, so that's the most fun of it. That's the most fun part of it.
Just one more question. So let's say we run A/B testing and one banner just wins, and like,
yeah,
yes, and but the teams look at this banner and do not understand the reason why it wins. And the idea just we should write the knowledge. So knowledge is like banner B wins, or banner should be some knowledge. So team should get some knowledge from the testing. We know that banner B wins and it's very nice and maybe conversion is crazy, but still team look at this and unable to understand why. But we need to create some knowledge for next generation, yeah? And what you do in that case is you still need to understand what's happening, because some theory said that like it just works, don't worry about how it works.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I would probably say we don't know why it worked, but I would definitely try to look into the UX or the audience. Always go deeper. But I mean, sometimes you just don't know. I mean, it's just like this. Obviously, there are multiple psychological factors as well. And if you really want to go deeper into the user psychology in the UX, it's fascinating, by the way. How triggers, how the way you form or like the sentences, like going into your brain. And there are multiple books as well. So that's really interesting, right? Just to try to look from the user psychology why the actual users behave this like that. But again, it's difficult. I mean, sometimes you just don't know, right? Sometimes you just don't know, and you don't know.
Well, sometimes the good practice was to give it to sales and ask clients about these points in a form of a feedback form or just a casual conversation, but it's more of a sentiment analysis already. So it breaches into a different field. But yeah, it depends how big your team is, and time, effort, and everything.
Yeah.
Hello, my name is Marius. So I have a question about A/B testing in case when you just try to test an idea, like Ilya represented today, right? So you have an idea, you have to test it, and give it a try for 100 users, right? But as you explained, this is not enough to make any conclusions from that. Do you have any suggestions what to do in this case when you have to test the product, but there's not too many?
Yeah, so I think in this case, what I would do myself, and again, there are multiple ways you can do it. So for example, if you want to just test an idea, let's say. And I read a nice book. It was called the Pretotyping, not prototyping, but Pretotyping. It's a very small book. I think somebody from Google wrote it. It's not very popular. But what the guy says is the pretotyping is actually, so if you make a prototype, if you have a prototype of a car, it's almost the working kind of a product. If you have the pretotype, you just build it from wood or from whatever. It's not a working. You just it's just a shape, and just you try to understand from this. And I read multiple cases that, for example, you were about to launch a product. The product didn't exist. You just want to validate the idea, right? So what people are doing, they're actually launching Google Ads, right? So saying, hey, well, trying to, like, people are typing for your idea, then you have the Google Ads, like, this is what my idea is. And they went into the landing page, which was like, we're not ready yet, but just leave us your data and we'll let you know when we are, open, right? Or tell us a couple of questions, we're working on this, right? And they try to understand what are the click-through rates. So, first of all, like, how many people ask for that? What are the click-through rates? And, try to validate it. Obviously, if there are people that say, well, actually, I'm interested, the first thing you can do, you can just, grab a phone and call them, or just try to understand, like, hey, I'm founder. Like, that's what I mentioned in my first presentation, that you need to understand what the users want to. You need to talk to them. And that's probably like one of the ways you can validate it. I was just speaking on the lunch. I was speaking with Philip that I know some mobile gaming companies. for example, they have an idea for a game, right? And obviously, like the game development or the mobile app, it takes millions and lots of time. So what they do, they just build a very simple 3 or 4 or 5 levels, right? Which basically you can finish in like half an hour. But then they put some money to promote it. And they actually observe how users behave, right? So if the users really enjoy it and they don't, they go from the very first to very fifth level in one go, it means it's sticky, and they're gonna actually invest some money into in developing it, right? So so these are the ways you can do it. It's more on kind of a idea validation, more of kind of a copywriting ads level than the actual product.
Thanks. I have like a follow-up question. My emphasis was on the idea is that when you test an idea, and what you explained makes sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when you want to understand if people are really interested, right? You want to be sure that you didn't make any mistakes in the ad, in the landing page, or whatever. And it seems like a good idea to do A/B testing, right? But in some sense, also, from what you presented, it doesn't make sense, because when you get like 100 clicks, you don't know if it's enough data. So how to, actually, do you need an A/B testing in that case, or you just don't do
And that's the question, right? Do you need a A/B test at all?
Yeah. Okay.
Probably not, right? Because what you want to A/B test, right? What you want to compare. I wouldn't do the A/B test in there. I would just try to understand, talk to the users, because I mean, with 100 users, it's probably impossible to get a good results. I mean, it can be random group, right? So whatever they tell you doesn't need to like be as like statistically significant for the bigger part, right? So I wouldn't do it. I mean, I wouldn't do it. I would just I would just try to be reasonable about it. Right, not have my like mind focused on let's do A/B test whatever we do, right? But like when you feel like this is the right time, let's do it. I would say I would always do A/B test in the way that you for example can impact the current business, right? So if you have some clients, have some working model and you want to change it, I wouldn't do it like I wouldn't roll it out, because it can really mess up. I would just A/B test and see if this actually makes sense, right?
Great, thanks.
Cool. Thank you very much, guys.